Good evening, everybody. I'm here to talk to you tonight about Ruby on Rails. My name is Sarah May. I'm a senior software engineer. See if I can get this mouse to work. At a company called LookSmart. I've been there for about a year. I've been doing Rails for about 3 years. And these guys are my hobbies. And before they came, and before I started doing Rails, I did a bunch of other random stuff. So I've been doing software commercially for about 10 years. And this is really difficult to see, I apologize. So here we come to web applications. So those of you who may have not have developed a web application before, here we have a system of tubes, otherwise known as the internet. And here are our clients. Here's our iPhone, here's our browser, and here's the basic architecture of a web application. You've got databases here on this side. This is the data you want to show to your users. You've got a web server on the front end, which is generally one of only a few choices. And then here you've got your web application. And whether you write a Java web application or a .NET or a Python or whatever, this is the only part that changes, right? Everything else is essentially the same. So we're going to talk a little bit about how Rails fills in this box. So Ruby and Rails, they are actually different things, believe it or not. Ruby is a programming language. It's been around for about 15 years. It was written by a guy in Japan, and curiously enough, has really poor UTF-8 support. And Rails is a package that you can get for Ruby that lets you write web applications in Ruby. So Ruby the language, Rails the framework. And there are Ruby developers that have nothing to do with Rails. They're minimal, but there are some. So here's Hello World in Ruby, and this is it. There is no semicolons. There are no import statements. There is nothing. You put this in a file and you run it, it will print Hello World to the screen. And that's kind of the smallest possible program generally that you can write in a particular language. And so it's useful to look at Hello World. Let's look at Hello World in Java. I actually had to move the font size down to get this all to fit on the screen. But you can see there's a lot of stuff here that doesn't really have anything to do with what we're trying to do, right? All we're trying to do is print Hello World. We've got these curly brackets and these angle brackets and these parentheses and the semicolon and the, yeah. So the philosophy behind Ruby is that they try and strip out all the stuff that you don't need and really let you focus on the interesting part of the program and not the niggly parts of the program like this. So I'm going to show you really quickly how you would create a Rails application if you wanted to create one. And the application I'm going to create, I'm going to call Tweet Book because it's a status updating service of some kind. And it lets you, post your status and look at lists of people's statuses. So here's step one. You type Rails and the name of your application into your shell of choice, and it generates a blank Rails application. And so that means that it includes everything you need except for your actual business logic, right? So it has all the wiring that goes from the database through the web server, and the only thing it's missing is the objects that you actually want to create in the database. So that's what we do in step two. In step two, what we're doing is we're generating, here's our status update, right? That's our object that we're trying to create. Oops, sorry. Okay. And it has two fields. It has a name, which is a string, which is the name of the person who's doing the status update, and the status, which is a text, which is essentially a longer string. And we can add more stuff later. So we run that, and then we run this, which creates our table in the database. So after we do all this, what do we have? We have a table in our database that holds all of our status updates. We have our basic HTML forms that have been generated for us that we didn't have to write, and everything's essentially been wired up. So we do step three. We start the server. And essentially after this, you can go to a URL, and you see a form, and this is very hard to see, but it's an HTML form to create a new status update. You type in your name, it has a space for the name, it has a space for the status, then you hit the create button down here at the bottom, and it all just kind of works. Now you'll notice that this is a very basic looking form. Rails basically leaves it up to you to make it look nice. But they deal with all the stuff behind that. So anything behind the UI, anything from the UI backwards to the database, that's what Rails deals with, and it lets you handle the UI. And applications of this type are generally called CRUD applications, and this is an acronym. It stands for create, read, update, and delete. And those are basically the operations that you generally want to do on any particular piece of data, right? So for a status update, you want to be able to create new ones so people can see what you're doing. You want to be able to read lists of status updates that other people have done. You want to be able to update existing status updates. And you want to be able to delete the one that you wrote when you were drunk. So you notice that that was it, 3 steps. There was nothing I skipped. There was nothing that I didn't do that you would need to do if you were doing this in real life. 3 steps. No XML files. I come from the Java world. Man, there are so many freaking XML files. No XML files. And this has to do with Rails philosophy, which is very similar to Ruby's philosophy, which is convention over configuration. And what that means is that they will generally assume that you want to do what everyone else wants to do. So whatever the base case is, whatever the most common case is, Rails will assume that that's what you want to do. And for most applications, that's fine. For many applications, though, you do want to override some of the base defaults, right? And Rails allows you to do that. So it's not like you're locked in. You can't just create CRUD apps, but that's what it's really, really good at if you want to do something pretty fast. So why would you use Rails particularly? Well, there are a couple of reasons. One is that you could focus, it lets you focus on the UI a lot more. So if you want to do like a whiz-bang Ajax UI, you don't want to spend your developer time on the back end wiring all this stuff up, right? You want to spend your developer time on the front end doing all the slides and reveals and the, all that stuff that I really don't know anything about. And you don't want to focus on the back end stuff. So this lets you, if you're a UI person, it lets you focus on what you find interesting, which is the front end stuff. Conversely, you can also, if you've got a really complicated data model, if you've got data coming in from 5 different databases, or you're doing a mashup, or you're doing all this stuff, you can essentially use Rails to put a very simple interface onto it that you then hand to your UI developers. And your UI developers don't need to know where the data is coming from. As far as they're concerned, it's just a standard Rails interface, and they can build their UI based on that. Difficulties with Rails is that it has a much smaller install base than, say, like PHP or Java or .NET, and that can make the IT people nervous. And I don't blame them. It's a new technology. It eats up unknown amounts of memory, and so that's been a difficulty. There's a couple interesting things happening in that space, though, and one is that in the last 6 months, there's been a lot of traction on running Rails within the JVM. So you can now deploy Rails applications within the Java virtual machine. So if you're a Java shop, you've got some J2E applications already or whatever, you can just toss a Rails application on there, and it makes it a lot easier for the people to get behind it. And in the next couple of months, probably the next, I would say, 6 months or a year, we're going to see Rails applications also on the CLR, which is Microsoft's virtual machine for .NET. So within a year, you should be able to run Rails applications essentially as a component within the .NET framework, which again opens up a lot more deployment options than we had before. So the last thing I want to talk about is the Rails and Ruby community. Excuse me. For the most part, with very rare exceptions, everyone in the Rails and Ruby community has been very welcoming to me, very open, very helpful to me. There are, the community is still mostly men, to be honest with you. It's probably about 2 to 3% women, based on the best numbers that I have so far. And that's pretty similar to other open source areas. So, within Linux, within other open source programming languages, you find about 2 to 3%. Overall in the industry, it's about 20%. So there's an interesting parity difference there. And a lot of the people in the Rails community tend to be on the younger side, and a few of them tend to affect a sort of rock star persona, which can be off-putting. It can be very off-putting. So one of the things that I've been involved in the last couple of months is something called Rails Bridge, which is a nonprofit that's dedicated to making the Rails community welcoming to anyone who wants to be there. And I'm running a project within that called Open Workshop, and we're doing Rails workshops, introductory Rails workshops. And I'm putting the first one on this weekend, tomorrow and Saturday. It's an introductory Rails workshop for women, and we had 80 seats. It essentially was full within 72 hours of posting without very much advertising at all, which was really, really exciting. Yeah, it's going to be great. So I'm already planning one in July. We've had a lot of interest from sponsors and things, so we've been able to keep it free, and it's going to be really exciting. And we're also going to be, part of this project is that I'm releasing all of the slides and logistics and other information from the workshop. It's all up on GitHub, and basically you can fork it into your own workshop wherever you live. So that means that I don't have to go everywhere and do these workshops. Instead, I can just point you at the GitHub repository. You can check it out and do it yourself. So if you're interested in the workshops, you should go to this URL, themeetup.com/sfruby, is the FFRuby meetup. And that's our partner here in San Francisco for the Ruby workshops. And if you join the meetup, you will get notices of future workshops and also the meetups that the Ruby meetup does, which are really good. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.